Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik. We have some incredible guest speakers lined up for you, including Jayant M. Kolla, who has published the latest book on artificial intelligence, AI Rising, India's Artificial Intelligence Growth Story. So you're not going to want to miss this one. But today we have a fantastic show. We will talk about hotel branding, and we have a very special guest who will introduce us to the processes and the challenges when you're creating a hotel brand for a company. And I was really thinking about, well, what would be the nice title for this episode? And so I contacted my Claude, who is my artificial intelligence assistant. I said, well, Claude, I shared a little bit of the script of my episode and asked Claude, well, can you give me a nice title for this? And so Claude wrote after 15 seconds, From Vision to Reality, Unraveling the Journey of Hospitality Brand Creation. So I couldn't come up that with myself. So that was AI. But anyway, let's start now with the show. And I'd like to welcome a dear friend. Welcome, Marc. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for inviting me to this session. Really look forward to exchanging with you and sharing some of my experiences.
So let's get started. First of all, the audience would like to know a little bit about your background. So could you share and speak about the journey you have had that led you to what you're doing these days of creating branding for hotel companies?
Thank you. I mean, obviously, it's a long story. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I decided very early on in my life that I wanted to be in the hotel business. I like to travel, I like people, and I must admit, I like good food too. And I like to serve. You know, some people like to serve, some don't, and that's what I liked. I started traveling immediately. I started in Kuwait, met my wife there actually. Got married in Benin, in Africa, went back to Europe, and eventually ended up in Asia. And did a normal hospitality career, moving on through food and beverage, eventually becoming a general manager. And I ended up in Dubai, and that's where a change in my career came when I got a phone call from Imar Hospitality, actually Imar Properties, and they said, would you like to join us and create a hospitality division? And that was an incredible challenge, and we'll talk about it later in this conversation. I then moved back to Asia and joined the Kui family to create another brand for them, and finally came back again to Dubai, joined Jumeirah, and also created another hotel brand for Jumeirah. I'm now in Riyadh. I'm working for PIF on a very confidential hospitality project, and hopefully I can divulge some of the details in a couple of months. But great to be here.
Oh, that's a fantastic career. I have to say I envy you because I always admired about the brand creation, and I always wondered what is all the work that goes into creating a brand. And I think that's an interesting topic that we can talk about. But maybe we can start what is your definition about brand? How do you see a definition? What is it all about? Maybe that's kind of the starting point on about branding.
Yeah, I actually, I have my own definition, but I did like you, I looked at, I didn't check with ChatGPT, but I looked at the history of brands, and it seems that, it started early on and was, it came from a torch from a light, so it's really, and that's the definition of brand for me is really created over time. A brand is not created immediately when you launch it, but it's really created through all the interaction of customers with your product, whatever it is. It could be, whatever, a car or a computer, or in our case, a hotel. So the brand is really created over time through all the interaction, through the look and feel, the service levels, the impression that you give to your customers, etc. So through every interaction, the brand creates value or increases in value, or sometimes also diminishes in value. So that would be my definition of a brand.
Well, that's a great definition, because some people talk about that you create in a very fast pace a brand, but what you're rightly saying, that it develops over time, and also it can change over time and can diminish, it can improve. So that's a very interesting, because actually that kind of also explains why certain brands are forgotten over time. That has been at one time some great brands, and then you don't hear anything from them. So yeah, that's I agree with you there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you. Sorry to interrupt, but you remember when One and Only was created, right? So honestly, I didn't think much about One and Only. What kind of name is that, right? So I mean, I couldn't relate to the name, but now it's an established brand and very well regarded. And I myself stayed in a couple of One and Onlys, and it's a wonderful brand that has developed over time because they were delivering on the brand promise to a certain extent, over delivering on the brand promise. So. And you're right, some of the brands have disappeared. So Kodak, as an example, a good example, just disappeared.
Yeah.
Or the good old Nokia, talking about Finland, right? So it's still around a little bit, but it's not the market leader anymore for many different reasons.
Yeah, that's what happens in this world where the technology changes. There's a generation shift, and the company is not able to keep up what the new demands and the expectations are of the customer. They take the customers for granted, which you never can.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Good. So maybe we can dive a little bit more into the process of creating a hotel brand. Maybe just call it a roadmap, if you will, or how does it look like when you obviously are having a team of people that you work with, and how has it worked for you, and how have you, and maybe you can just describe a little bit about that process.
Yeah. But what I can do is talk a little bit about the process, and then also talk about the 3 or 4 experiences, or maybe 3 experiences that I had, which are different experiences on different brand creations, right? So, I mean, I guess if you start from scratch today, when you look at it, there must be a vision. I think every great brand has a visionary leader that had a gut feeling, in a sense. Now, obviously, that gut feeling, say, where do you see the white space? That's where it all starts. Where's the opportunity? And it's really forward looking. And when you create a brand, the danger sometimes is to look too much at the competition and at the past versus looking at trends. Where's the market going? And great visionary leaders have this ability to have that vision to say what is going to happen in a couple of years, 5, 10, 20 years, right? Because obviously that's an important factor. Now, I'm not saying that research shouldn't be done. I think obviously if you have the means and the investment opportunities, then clearly the research helps to understand the market, where the markets are going. But I would really spend most of my, if I had to invest money, on forward-looking research, right? So where are the trends going? And again, looking for that white space in the market. Then really, what's the purpose? Your brand must have a purpose. What's the deep down purpose? And what's the positioning? Again, back to the white space in the market. How do you position yourself, or are you going to position yourself going forward? And then it becomes a little bit more technical, where you talk about what is the brand personality, the brand voice. I think an important part of it, and we'll talk about it later, I think it's the whole storytelling, So when you start launching your brand, it has to be very catchy, and people have to say, "Oh, okay, I remember that." It is memorable. And finally, actually not the most important, but pick the name. But I found in the whole brand creation, the naming being the most difficult, more complicated, just because it's so subjective. In the case of Imar, we had three branding companies, naming companies. We had 1,000 names. We came down to one name actually that were chosen internally. It was the address. There's a specific reason for that, and we'll talk about it later. And for Patina in Singapore, actually we didn't use. I think we used one agency, and there it was also fairly simple because I had one person to report to, so that decision was quite quick and good. And finally, if you have a lot of decision makers, it becomes very difficult because everybody has an opinion. I don't like this name, I don't like that name, etc. But actually, the name is important, and there's certain guidelines for the names that you want. You want short, catchy, etc., and available, of course, that you can trademark. But at the end of the day, it's back to what I said earlier. The brand is created over time, and suddenly you get used to a name. When you look at One and Only, back to my story, now everybody knows One and Only, and it's a great brand. Then you have other brands that are, Hilton. It's a name, Marriott, Mr. Marriott. It's a brand, but it's really the last name of the founder of the company. And the other part is really the slogan. Take Nike, just do it. A catchy slogan is gone. With the address, we created Where Life Happens for many different reasons, again, that I can explain later. And finally, it becomes really a branding agency that gives you the look and feel, the logo, etc. But it's, again, very technical. And creating the website and so on. So that is kind of the steps that you have to go through if you create a brand.
During the process, how do you test what works and what doesn't work in order to that you know that you're on the right path? Is it the gut feeling, or are you very scientific about it?
Let me maybe talk you through the three experiences that I had, right? So for example, let's start with the address, right? So we had a white sheet of paper, but we had an existing product, So we had hotels under constructions, So it was really actually not a white sheet of paper because we did have the hotel that were being built. So we actually built the brand around the product, So we said, okay, these hotels, they are very close to demand drivers like the malls, right? There is a white space in the market. At that time in Dubai, there were no lifestyle hotels, what you call lifestyle hotels. So now they're all over the place, right? So then we said, okay, let's position that brand as a lifestyle brand. On how you define that would be a whole other podcast, obviously. And then, let's create that brand around the activities of the malls, So that's why our slogan was where life happens, right? So active lobby, very attractive food and beverage, close to a mall, a buzzing hotel, etc., etc. So in this case, it really started with the product. Now, another example, and I had the great pleasure to work with Mr. Giorgio Armani. And that was an interesting exercise because you have an existing brand, very strong brand, globally known. But, what does it mean to have an Armani hotel? What is the experience of an Armani hotel? And we had to really create the Armani hotel experience, hospitality experience. And this was a huge issue for Mr. Armani himself, because for him, every interaction with his brand is going to influence the brand. So in a retail environment, he can control the experience but much better because it's a physical store, so that he can control. He can control to a certain extent the service, the atmosphere. He can certainly control the product because he's creating the product. In the case of a hotel, he gave away his brand to an independent operator. And we have so many touch points in the hotel business that can go wrong or go very well. the check-in, the interaction, collecting your bag, calling the hotel, having a good meal, etc. So that was really a huge, very, very complicated, and he felt really very insecure at the beginning when we opened the hotel. Afterwards, obviously, we delivered on the service, etc. He was very pleased, etc. And I want to give you a little anecdote with Mr. Armani, if you don't mind. So I guess we're drifting a little bit, but I think that's the whole purpose of a podcast like this. When Mr. Armani came for the opening of the hotel, we gave strict direction to all our colleagues. Don't approach Mr. Armani. Don't do selfies. Be very careful. He wants to be very private, etc. And when he arrived, it was completely different. He was the first one to take selfies, to do group pictures with the staff, or with our colleagues. And it was a wonderful experience. And then I said to him, "Oh, Mr. Armani, I think this is so great that you're so approachable." And he told me, "Look, Marc, I represent the brand. This is my name. So if I am not approachable, if I am not perceived as being approachable, that means my brand is not approachable." And that was a great experience to me. And that talks about, every contact with the brand, you think, this is a great brand, this is a brand for me, or this is not a good brand for me. I tell you another brand in the fashion industry, and then you can jump in one quick question, 1 second. For me, Tom Ford, fantastic brand, but honestly, it's not a brand for me, because if I go to a Tom Ford store, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel welcome. I feel I don't belong there. It's obviously very expensive, but I think I potentially could afford to buy a pair of shoes there, but I don't feel that brand is right for me. So I think that's my little anecdote. I think you wanted to say something, Sam?
Well, I think it's a great testament about a personality who has a name on the brand, because it's so easy to identify with Mr. Armani when you see him, that he is in a very approachable way rather than being distant. I mean, there are many fashion designers who are less approachable. They want to just create their fashion and be seen on the catwalk to bow, and then they will not be around anymore. But this is a very good. I mean, I have an experience with the Armani Hotel, which actually I liked. I mean, of course I paid attention to the staff employee fashion, or whatever it's called these days, or uniform. But of course they were very fashionable, and also the various offerings. And one particular thing what I liked about the hotel was Peck, this casual restaurant. And I did not know what this Peck is. And then, of course, when I went to Milan, I knew that there's a place where you can go and buy some good food and good things. So, I mean, it just gave a kind of a good feel about what Milano and Giorgio Armani represented. So, yeah, it worked very well. I think you had you covered all the key points.
Yeah, so when we go to the third brand, I mean, the third brand was the Patina brand that's in Singapore, right? So there, again, we didn't spend much money or investment in research. So again, it was a little bit of a gut feeling and a vision, shared vision with Mr. Kui, myself, etc. And again, it started with a hotel. We had a hotel under construction, and we thought, how do we position the hotel? How do we find, again, that white space? And today, there's less and less white spaces, so maybe that's another discussion we can have later. It's really to find that white space. And what is the common vision of the founder of the hotel company? So obviously the Kui family are lovers of great architecture, art, etc. So picking the name Patina was an easy one. We had two choices, and we quickly picked Patina. Obviously, It's the patina that develops over years over a beautiful piece of furniture. And we worked on the flagship, and the issue, and that's a big issue that we will talk about later, is the flagship strategy. That's where, with the address and with Armani, we were in a situation where we did really well because we had two flagships. We had obviously the Armani Hotel in Dubai, which is a true flagship, and then the downtown address, which was the best hotel, the best location, etc. The challenge that I had in Singapore was I didn't have a operating flagship. So we went through the whole process. We did some research to try to find the white space. So we thought that we had it. We had the purpose and the positioning, personality. Also, how did we differentiate ourselves from established brands? We had the story, we had the name, we had the slogan, the brand, etc. But I didn't have the flagship, and that was the biggest challenge that I had, because people said, "I love the name, I love your brand, I love all the things you're doing, and I trust the Kui family that will do a great job, and I think you have an incredible experience, etc." But I'd like to get the look and feel. I'd like to stay in that hotel to see if it's the right hotel for me going forward. So I call that the flagship strategy, the first flagship, which will create the brand. And when you look at all the great brands, you take Raffles. Raffles started in Singapore. Everybody associates themselves to Raffles. You have Waldorf Astoria, clearly, St. Regis, etc. So all these great brands had a flagship, and I think that's an important lesson learned, looking backwards, that really slowed down the development of that brand. And it's only recently that the first Patina opened in the Maldives, very successful, I believe.
Yeah. It's interesting, this flagship strategy that you talk about is that if we take a brand that is very well known in, let's say, out of New York, a very classic hotel in New York that you hear about them, you read about them, but when you stay in the same branded hotel in a different location, what are the key things that one should feel when you go there? Because the name is one thing, but how can one relate to the brand in New York when you're staying, let's say, in Dubai or in Bangkok, for instance?
Yeah. I mean, this is a very good question, a good point. When you look at some brands that got diluted, right? And that's what you were adhering to. You stay in I worked for Ritz-Carlton when Ritz-Carlton was created by Horst Schulze, etc. They had a very, very strong brand identity. But honestly, now, nothing against Marriott. I mean, it's a great company. I'm not saying anything, but you can stay in so many different Ritz-Carltons. And what differentiates maybe is obviously the culture and the service, right? Other than that, it could be a St. Regis. It could be, it could be any other hotel, unfortunately. So it becomes more and more difficult when you start growing to retain that brand identity, and the only way, in my opinion, is really to own the hotels, right? So you're you own the assets, and then you can control in a much better way. So you take, for example, a brand like Peninsula, 10, 12 hotels only in the world, but they own most of them, or at least 50% equity. When you start going into asset-light strategy, and the big players are all there, they all asset-light, right? They don't own the assets anymore. So that's when you really lose control over the brand. So the only thing you can really influence the brands is by developing brand markers, right? So I call these non-negotiable. So let's say the clock. The clock at the Waldorf, right? You have to have a clock in the lobby. Okay, fine. You got the clock. Or maybe the staircase. I think St. Regis has the staircase, or the butlers, etc. So these are non-negotiables. But again, if you don't own the hotels, you have less and less influence, right? And some brands have done a great job at retaining their identity. Take an Aman Hotel, right? An Aman Hotel, you step into an Aman Hotel, you know that you're in an Aman Hotel. It's very peaceful, Asian design, etc. It doesn't. Not every Aman Hotel looks the same, but you know that you're in an Aman Hotel. Now, other brands have got diluted over the years and didn't have that same direction. So, for example, I think something that accorded really well with Ennismore, they bought quite a few brands, as we know, 42. When I left, it was 42. It's probably 45 by now. But they retained the initial founder of the brands. You know, they say that person potentially retained some ownership. I don't know exactly what the deal was, but they are in charge of the brand essence. When you look at the Mama Shelter, you look at the 25 Hours. So the founders of these brands are still with the company, and I hope they will stay going forward. And they're really the brand guardians of these brands. And I think that was a very good move that they did.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I had a chance to meet some of the founders of these brands, and when you meet them, they are larger than life and very personable. You can understand how their what really was created about their brand, and I think this is very smart that to retain them, because this is when it comes only just a name and a brand, and then you have different stakeholders in the company who wants to have their say what the brand should be like, then of course there might be a shift in what the brand will be and what the brand experience is. There comes efficiency, comes we don't need this, we can cut down that, which was originally the basis for the brand. So it's very smart that they do that. I want to can speak about a little bit the market research that goes into creating a hotel brand. You said that if it's a single visionary, he's looking at that white space, looking for future looking or forward looking. But are there some systematic marketing researches that are conducted and maybe tested to find out what is the direction? Is this really the way we should go about in creating a brand for this particular location or the market?
No, absolutely. I think, like I said, there's two areas. Obviously, looking back and looking sideways and looking forward. You know, so looking back, looking at the history of, the history basically, saying, and then looking sideways, looking at the competition. You know, what is out there. You know, and I must say, things have changed enormously over the years. When you look back when we started in the hotel business, you had a couple of established brands, the Hiltons, the Sheratons, and we both worked for these brands, so they were the established ones. That's where you used to go. And then eventually there's an emergence of boutique hotels. I still remember, you might remember when Mandari opened in Bali. I took my family there. I knew the GM or developer, and he invited me to come over. So I said, wow, this is great. I go there. I went with Rima, my daughter, Stephanie, and I couldn't believe I had my own plunge pool. I said, this is like incredible, right? I have never seen this before, that you have a villa and on top of it you have a plunge pool. Now, today you go to the Maldives, the Holiday Inn in the Maldives has a plunge pool. So how do you differentiate yourself? Having just a plunge pool is not a differentiation anymore, for sure. So You look at the pool, maybe you want a bigger pool, or maybe you want jacuzzi, or I don't know what you want. But really, that has changed, right? And then obviously the whole trend of the boutique hotels, then the whole trend of the lifestyle hotels, etc., etc., etc. So, and we have come to a point where there's so many brands out there. You told me 1,000 brands in the market now, in hotel brands, right? I think you researched that, or Claude told you also. Is it Claude that told you?
No, I really Googled myself.
You Googled yourself. Okay, good. but you look at the big boys, right? Accor 42 brands, right? And I said by now they probably have 45 brands. How differentiated are they, these brands? So big question mark on how are the brand experiences really in line in each one of the hotels that you're going to stay. So it becomes hugely difficult to find the white spaces. I still think there are some white spaces. On what I said earlier in our discussion is really the main focus should be trends. Where are the markets going? So obviously at the moment I'm in Saudi Arabia, so we're looking at trends in Saudi Arabia. It's a young generation that is growing up. What are their needs? Not today, the needs in 5 years. Because the hotel takes 3, 4, 5 years to open. On a brand, to establish a brand, you have to establish it for the next generation if that's the target market that you want to go after. Again, the main focus should be on forward looking. Obviously creating personas. What kind of customer are you going to attract? Is it the young, audacious traveler? Is it the well-established? What kind of income level? Is it male, female, etc.? So that research is hugely important because you want to understand what is the audience. Number one, the white space, but also what kind of audience do you want to captivate?
So when you are working on identifying the target audience for hotel brand, you mentioned already, you touched on this, but could you talk a little bit more deeper into that target audience? Because this is something that is quite interesting in the sense that we are looking at the generation now, let's say, what is it? The latest generation is Generation X, I think, or Z or something, which is going to be 10 years old. How do you go about thinking, well, they're going to be our largest potential audience. Now, they are very critical about, they're on social media, they're very critical about ecological issues, and they are blaming the parents and the grandparents for screwing up the planet. So how do I create a brand for them?
No, I mean it's a good point, right? So it's so again, working with consultants that specialize in that area. Say if you have the means and on it's definitely worth investing in that area to look again back to the white spaces. Is that the white space you want to be in, right? You might want to be in a different white space. You want to look at maybe, I don't know, all-inclusive or something else, so a different, and then also nationalities, when you look at the demographics of the up-and-coming societies, you look at China, you look at India, you look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is, 35 million, 70% are below the age of 30. So that's a growing population. So is that the white space that we want to capture, right? And that's the discussion, and that's the research that needs to be done.
Yeah. You mentioned about brands earlier, and I was looking up what was going on in the brand space and the hotel companies, and I think one of the issues that I learned was that there are large number of companies actually before they even launched the product, or maybe they have it as a project. They give it kind of a code name, and while they're trying to figure out what is the brand that they can use. And I noticed that in New York there was a fair, and there was a brand that was marketed as Project Mid-X Studios, which sounds like a film production company or a new pair of Nike shoes. And it was actually an announcement of a new hotel brand with just a placeholder or a code name. What is the issues with securing a trademark? It's quite touchy. I mean, you were very fortunate with address because that's you can do it. But when you come up with something else, or patina for that matter, that's also a very good word. But what are the trademark issues that you have run across during your career in creating brands?
Yeah, I mean the trademark goes. It it is obviously part of the naming. You need to be able to trademark the names. Now you can't to trademark the name worldwide in all different sections becomes hugely expensive, so if you know that your target market is going to be, as an example, you have a Saudi brand as an example, or GCC, so you're going to trademark your names, maybe major destination, but the whole of GCC. So you're not going to trademark your name in China because your interest is absolutely not to go to China, right? So I think that's an important aspect to do before you launch your brand, clearly, So, and that excludes a lot of names because when you find a good name, they say, "Oh, this is great. It's been used already, or it's trademarked already, So that's an important aspect. So I guess for me, what they're doing is, in my opinion, just a gimmick, So I can't think of anything else. If you launch the brand and you're ready to launch the brand, then you launch the brand, right? And you launch it with a flagship, a big bang, and so on, and then you are successful, So, but the trademarking is an important aspect. And back also to the naming, finding the right name. Again, as a couple of guidelines, it has to be catchy, obviously, so that's quite clear. Easy to remember, easy to Google, etc. Not too long, one or two syllables, so on, so on, and so on. And again, the names that they develop over time, and they become great names if your product or if your hotel is a great hotel and you have found your niche.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what role does storytelling play in creating a hotel brand. I'm sure you have some ideas to share about that, the storytelling, and maybe some anecdotes also.
Yeah, I think storytelling is huge, right? Because everybody remembers a story. I remember so many stories from my various stays in hotels, but I don't remember the color of the carpet. I don't remember if there was a chandelier, and I certainly don't remember the color of the stone, right? So, but I do remember people. I remember the stories of the hotels, right? So now, of course, on you can work with people that help you develop the stories. The stories have to be there, right? And they have to be also, not too engineered. So you come into a hotel and the tea is this and that, and then the butter comes from the farm next door, and this comes from here, etc. So it becomes a little too engineered, but a true story. And I tell you a little bit about Patina, because that was all about storytelling. When we were interviewing, and we had already a team in place, we were interviewing candidates to join the organization. We asked them, "Do you have a hobby?" Right. So if they said no, didn't hire. But if they had a hobby, what did it mean? It meant, number one, that they were passionate about something, so they could develop a passion. If you don't have a hobby, I say, "Oh, I don't do anything. I watch TV." Da, da, da. You're not going to be the right person to have passion in what you do. The second thing is, if it's an interesting hobby, then it's a great storytelling. So, for example, in Singapore, my old story was always Johnny in the laundry. He's very passionate about Tai Chi, right? Tai Chi. And if a customer comes and he said, "Oh, by the way, Tai Chi, I heard about Tai Chi." I said, "Oh, wait, we have an expert. It's Johnny in the laundry." I call Johnny. Johnny comes and interacts with the customer and is passionate about Tai Chi. And he tells him, "By the way, if tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock, you want to come to the national park, my grandfather is teaching a Tai Chi session every morning at 5 o'clock." Customer
Wow.
goes with Johnny to the park, has the most incredible experience.
Yeah.
and will tell that story so many times. And that's storytelling as an example. So the whole, one of the brand pillars for Patina, I don't know if it still is, was storytelling. Finding people who have a story to tell and a passion that they can. It doesn't matter what the passion was. It could be collecting, I don't know, bookmarks, or could be collecting butterflies or whatever it was. But that was the storytelling, and made a huge, was really a brand pillar for that brand.
That was a great story. I mean, this is I'm told that the best story about the hotel is that the hotel brand becomes the fifth, is occupying the fifth seat at the dinner table. So there are the discussions that you have just stayed in a wonderful stay in a hotel, and then basically the stories are about about Johnny, for instance, or someone else, or somebody who is passionate about butterflies, and you learn something new in the location where you stayed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the promise was that staying at the hotel, you will stay at the hotel and will leave the hotel you will feel better when you leave the hotel. Now it could be that you physically feel better because you had a beautiful massage, this, that. You learn something, right? You learn something. You walk away. Oh, I have this incredible Tai Chi story. I'm gonna look into it, and I'm really going to do to practice it myself. Or maybe you had a great gourmet experience. Whatever the experience was, but you need to leave the hotel enriched. If you leave the hotel just having slept there and paid a lot of money for it, that's not right. Then we failed. That was the objective. You need to leave the hotel enriched.
Yeah. Just a small anecdote. We traveled with my wife to London, and we stayed at the Corinthia Hotel. And I love poached eggs, and this one of the things I don't have no idea how to make them, but I have some ideas. But the way they made it was so perfect. So I mentioned that we talked about with my wife. I said, she said, "Oh, I really wonder how I can learn how to make it." So cheeky as I was, I asked the restaurant that any way that we can. My wife would like to learn how to make the way you make poached eggs. Okay, not a problem. The next morning we were invited to the restaurant, and I met the breakfast cook who is the expert in this, and we learned how to make the best eggs Benedict and poached egg. And if you ask me how does the carpet look like in the Corinthia Hotel, no idea, but the poached egg was really the thing that I still remember, and I would go back for it because of that.
Yeah. And how many times did you tell that story? How many times did you tell it? You probably told to many people.
Absolutely, because it's one of those, when it comes to London, it's but memorable stay in one of the hotels, and it was the poached egg story, really. People can relate to a great poached egg. So, yeah. Well, Marc, some great discussions here about branding, but I have just two more questions for you before we wrap up. And one question I like to ask all my guests, and besides what we talked about, what are some other trends that you see happening, or trends happening in the hospitality branding that hoteliers should take note of? You touched on many things, but there's some particular thing that you still like to mention about that.
Yeah, I think I think people are taking shortcuts with the brandings. Sometimes they go straight into branding agency, give me a logo, give me this, and then they work kind of backwards and don't put enough emphasis on delivering, on the over delivering on the brand promise, right? So how do you do that? And the importance of culture. The culture, what kind of culture are you going to create? And that was my experience, obviously, with Ritz-Carlton, how important that culture is. We both worked with Hyatt, and a great company, but unwritten culture. I don't know if you remember, There was not really a written culture. It was kind of, we all kind of were working the same way, hands-on, nice to each other, work hard, play hard, all that good stuff. But that was kind of, that's how I described that culture, right? We had with Hyatt. Ritz-Carlton was really, really descriptive, etc. And I think the culture is hugely important, and the culture cannot be created by a branding agency. I recently did a project, and I said, okay, let's talk about the culture. Yeah, but we got the culture. Our agency in London did the culture. I said, guys, this is not how it works. It's we are the creators of the culture. I say, what do you mean? We are going to do it? Yes, we are going to do it. We're going to sit for 2 days. What kind of company do you want to create? What kind of culture do you want to create? And how are we going to make sure that we do it? Then the same thing was about the employee promise and so on. I said, forget, it's nice work, but the agency will do, they should take care of the website, the look and feel, etc., the brochures and whatever it is. But the culture comes from within. We have to create that culture. We have to make sure it's lived every day. Well, that's where Ritz-Carlton was so successful in really making sure that you walk the talk. Small anecdote. I know we're running out of time, but that's a good one.
No, there's plenty of time.
Okay. I worked with Hyatt right in Singapore, great. And finally I got approached by Ritz-Carlton, and they told me all about this culture and the blue glass and the blue and ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And I said, look, okay, I'm going to join them, but I know how to run hotels. I've done all that, and this is typical American, brainwashing, etc. So I looked at it. It's all about respect and looking after people, looking after your colleagues. So, there was nothing that I thought I couldn't believe in, right? And when I started really believing, when I went to my introduction to Atlanta, and I had my little Credo card in my pocket, I looked at it on the plane, etc. And suddenly I go to what they call a lineup, and I see Horst Schulze, the founder of Ritz-Carlton, everybody lined up, all their executive team, myself included, and he was quizzing everybody on the culture and say, okay, what's brand pillar number 1? John, tell me now, and give me an example. I say, I better learn this. I better quickly learn, because I don't know it by heart, so I was kind of sweating. It says, if he asks me a question, I'm not going to know the answer. That's when I truly became a believer, because I said, look, if the chairman, if the CEO of the company takes it so seriously, then it has to. And then I became a believer. I went back, I lined up my kids. I said, guys, that's it, quiz me on the Credo card. So they quizzed me, and my wife said, what happened to you? They give you a blue pill or something. I said, no, I truly believe in it. Next thing, I did my lineup with my team. And then I went out and did some speeches, etc. about Ritz-Carlton. What was it? It was created by a small group and lived every single day.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of working. I had some colleagues who had coming from Ritz-Carlton, and really that kind of culture rubbed off on the kind of work we were doing. I remember in one lineup there was a discussion about asking. It was a staff who were lined up, and there was a from housekeeping. They were called roommates at the time. So they asked. She was asked, "Well, what is your responsibility? What do you do here?" Well, I'm cleaning rooms. No, you are here to create experiences. That was sort of the attitude to that. It's not that physical of cleaning the room was one thing, but actually creating the experience for the guest was what really was the what everybody was talking about. So that's how I remember.
Yeah, I mean, that's the purpose. That's the purpose, right? I mean, if you come to work just to clean a room, you're not going to create special memories, right? But you can. You have that influence.
Yeah.
And everyone has the influence, right? So
good. All right, Marc, my final question is that if people like to connect with you, where can they reach you on any of the public networks, so you can maybe start a discussion with them and maybe answer some questions that they may have.
Sure. Sure. LinkedIn is probably the best one, right? So you can look Marc Dardenne, you can search it, and I normally click accept all the invitations, normally. so I'd love to continue exchanging, and it's great, So I love these podcasts,
Very good, Marc. Well, thank you very much I appreciate you joining today's episode, and I certainly learned a lot myself about branding. But now for all the viewers and listeners, stay tuned for the next episode, because we will continue with Marc. We will talk about something about what we have done in our past and share some anecdotes. So I hope to look forward to welcoming you again to the next episode.